Hello, everyone, and welcome to the UBC Talks webinar. We're still having our attendees joining. We are kicking off the year 2022 with the UBC Talks webinar series. Today, with the talk about holistic solutions to mobility in port areas. And we will bring methods, tools, and inspiration from around the Baltic Sea to your attention. My name is Maria Andreeva. I'm a communications coordinator of the Union of the Baltic Cities Sustainable Cities Commission, and I will be your host for today. We also have on board today my colleague, Atham Maharamli, who will support our technical side of the event. So if you have any technical contents, questions during the webinar, please send them to us via the chat, and we'll do our best to answer. Right, but participants are still joining, and while I'm at the introduction stage, I will launch a little warm-up poll, which you are all invited to answer, as we would love to know how you got to know about this webinar. So let's have it. How did you learn about our webinar? Was it the website where you found this information? Was it our social media, or did you read it in our newsletter? Maybe it was a recommendation from a colleague. Let us know. And while you're sending your answers, maybe back to the introduction. So if you're joining our webinar series for the first time, UBC Talks are organized by the Union of the Baltic Cities Sustainable Cities Commission to discuss relevant topics in the sustainability field. UBC is the leading network of cities in the Baltic Sea region, working together to foster smart, sustainable, and safe cities. And our commission is one of the several topical commissions of the Union. We work with the matters of environmental urban sustainability. We have started with the UBC Talks webinar back in 2020 and already explored various sustainability aspects, including energy efficiency trends, the role of water management in climate adaptation, different multimodal approaches to urban mobility. And this is the first webinar of this year, and we hope you will also join the upcoming webinars during this year. Let's look in the meantime at the poll results. So most of you actually got recommended by a colleague. That's nice to know. That's the best communication you can get. But you're also most welcome to follow our website, our social media, our newsletters to also get to know about other events and other webinars that we are launching. This is also a good source of information. Right, I'm closing the poll. Yes, so now let's quickly take a look at some technical information of this webinar. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be later uploaded to our website and our YouTube channel. The attendees' microphones are all muted, but you can at any time, whenever you wish to ask a question, if it's a question to the panelists, please write it in the question box. If it's a question to us, the organizers, or you would just like to bring something to everyone's attention, please use the chat. And the questions for the speakers would be answered in the session after all of the presentations. Now let's take a look at today's agenda. We have a list of exciting presentations. And we will hear today from the Union of the Baltic Cities, member cities, Turku, Hamburg, Tallinn, and Riga, and about their views on sustainable and holistic approaches to port area mobility and planning. And all of this cooperation could not have been possible without the transnational project HUPMOBILE, which was led by the Aalto University in Helsinki, Finland. So we will hear all about the project and the great tools that the project can provide. And the webinar will end with the Q&A. And where we'll bring the questions, yes. And yes, thank you. Without further ado, I would like to welcome the first speakers, Tero, Haahtela, and Teemu Surakka from the Aalto University, the lead partner of the HUPMOBILE project. And they will tell us a little bit about the project and how the transnational cooperation helped to provide interactive tools for city planners. Please, Tero, the floor is yours.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Tero Haahtela from Aalto University, and together here with my colleague Teemu Surakka to tell you about this HUPMOBILE in a nutshell, transnational cooperation providing interactive tools for city planners. So firstly, HUPMOBILE is a holistic urban and peri-urban mobility project, and it was in the third Baltic Sea regions a call for proposals in innovation, natural resources, and sustainable transport. The project started in the beginning of 2019 and ended at the end of last year, 2021. Our total budget was around 2 million euros, of which European regional development funding was 1.5 million euros. And HUPMOBILE's objective was to provide a holistic approach to the planning, implementation, optimization, and management of integrated sustainable mobility solutions in Baltic seaport cities. So we have shared, of course, knowledge together and developed together already existing solutions, but it's not only about the tools, it was also about the processes, how to apply and get the stakeholders involved. And here you can see the participants of the project, the cities of Turku, Hamburg, Tallinn, and Riga, and you'll hear good presentations from their tools and viewpoints also later today. And then there were also involved Aalto University, Royal Institute of Academy of Kungliga Tekniska Högskolan from Sweden, UBC, our host today, and then ITL Digital Labs Estonia. So it's been all about learning together, transferring knowledge, and increasing capabilities in sustainable holistic urban mobility by cooperation of the Baltic cities. We did several tools, and firstly, we would like to introduce you the HUPMOBILE self-assessment tool. So this self-assessment tool is part of the toolbox that is built to help you pinpoint possible areas of improvement in your region or the possibilities to have the best impact in selected sustainability aspects. This is very simple to use, and the statements in this self-assessment tool have been developed with help of the city and traffic planners of our participating cities in the project. So it's very manageable and easy to use, so different stakeholders can be used in implementing the sustainable solutions, and they can also use their educated estimations in the assessment for shortlisting first sustainable mobility solutions for the discussion. So we do not try to make any concrete benchmarking of experience or concrete suggestion. We are just wanting to provide you a tool to really showcase the areas that may need to be addressed to put further attention. When you have answered the survey or the questions there, you see this kind of a solution. So it has 16 different areas divided to 4 different categories. And it gives you an impression as an expert or as a representative of a stakeholder to access what is important for you and in what scale. In this picture, you can see from 0 to 5. So it gives you an impression of what is currently your status and in comparison to the Baltic Sea region. So it doesn't say that what you should do, because everyone, of course, knows that everyone has different kind of environment in your city, but it gives you an opportunity to take a leap and take in any sort of incremental improvements when you can compare and think what to do. So we also want to mention that we do not try to replace any of the existing tools, because we also know that there are others like, for example, Green City tool that's already available, and we know that it's quite simple for city planners to answer. And it's also aimed for the sustainable urban planning. However, what we aimed with the self-assessment tool was for the wider board of stakeholders. For example, you can link these tools to companies to have an opinion, and these questions are very straightforward and easy to answer, also the company representatives. And the 4 different areas we have covered with those 16 questions 3 of them are related to the traditional sustainability themes of environmental and economical and societal sustainability. But we also wanted to have the 4th category, which is attractiveness, because of course we want our solutions to be not just sustainable, but also attractive, so that people and stakeholders would get involved and accept the different solutions. So this attractiveness is a combination of an area to be attractive for companies, people, and those residents who come there to interact, to be active, and just to have a good life there. Then the second tool we have is about accessing the realized impact of real solutions. So we have combined and made a process for real cities to document their best practices, and this tool is basically about sharing your knowledge and insight. So we have provided a simple template with supporting documentation, explaining what we mean and what we have meant. And it's a very simple process for getting the most important stakeholders to participate in the process. So if you have good solutions to share with us, please don't hesitate to fill in the form and go to our website. And also at this moment, I want to emphasize that all these tools and links to them can also be found from our HUPMOBILE web pages. So please go to the HUPMOBILE homepage afterwards and look for further information and try the tools. So here you can see an example of a fields template. It's very straightforward to use. Then this is all that the stakeholders will get, just a simple description of the area and details and the solutions. And the most important thing in this template is that what are the unique aspects and the frame conditions that explain how this particular solution has been successful in the city where it has been implemented. So it's a concise information piece or a recipe about how to implement something in a city that hopefully is similar to your city if you want to do the adaptation and transfer knowledge. So if you compare this, for example, to some other approaches, here you can see the example from Turku's year-round shared ferry bikes and implemented has been, and we do not try to do benchmarking with this tool. So there are better and there are good existing benchmarking solutions. Our aim is to share the best practices. So on the right-hand side, you can see this Turku's year-round shared ferry bikes implementation. So we collect those solutions that are already done where we have reasonable ideas also about the cost and how it has been gone in practice. And then finally, of course, everyone wants to find what are good solutions for their own environment. And yes, we know that there are already also in this field several good tools and platforms, for example, Bubble. And we are not trying to replace them, but what we have done is that our opportunity makes it possible to filter the solutions based on your immediate needs. So what we have done is that we have created the database of solutions that is hopefully also later on filled with your solutions, and the database can be filtered with different conditions, and then it shows if you have certain immediate needs of your concerning areas and what could be done to improve your sustainability and mobility. So please go and see the database and the solutions, and you can see the filtering there, and we'll hopefully also develop it further with you when we get new solutions there. Also, on top of these, we have also provided two very small tools in the web pages related to best practices for employers to support the use of public transport, and an interactive map of best transport solutions in Baltic Sea region. However, there's no time to go there. time is running, so I think that's all. Thank you very much. Here you can see my and Teemu's contact information, and we'll be there in the Q&A session, and delighted to answer your questions there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tero. A wonderful insight into the project. And now we'll go into the first city case. Aalto University, in cooperation with the city of Turku, made a research about the mobility behavior of urban residents. So let's hear from Marketta Kyttä, Aalto University, who will tell us more about it. Please, Marketta, the floor is yours.
Just a second, I will share my screen. I hope you can see it now.
Yes, we see it. Perfect.
Thank you very much. So let me explain you what kind of case we had in city of Turku, where we studied the mobility behavior of urban residents. And here we applied a special methodology I will explain to you. Traditionally, when you are trying to gather knowledge from people, you are using methods like interviews, surveys, public hearings, observations. But the problem here is often that you only receive typically verbal information that is a little bit hard to apply in planning practice. So there are alternative ways to collect data from human behavior and experiences. And here I am referring to a place-based methodology that can be called public participation GIS methodology. And actually the methodology I'm talking about is called Maptionnaire. And with this methodology, you can collect information from human behavior and experiences place-based and actually comprise a whole new layer of knowledge that is geocoded. Why this would be a good idea, perhaps? Well, this approach provides many wonderful new opportunities to research, but also to participatory planning, because the very fact that you would be linking human aspirations or wishes to places and those comment or viewpoints are given an address, you also are linking them to very specific planning or design solutions. And therefore, the knowledge might be very interesting for planners, very concrete information. This Maptionnaire methodology is an existing tool developed by my team, and it has been used in widely more than 35 countries already, and by cities like New York and Stockholm and Denver and so on. In Turku, we did also Maptionnaire research where we studied the mobility of people in Turku region and the future of a harbor area. We asked people to tell place-based about their daily travel and also about their mobility in Turku harbor area. This data was collected luckily just before the COVID pandemic, which was very lucky because then we were able to gather knowledge about normal mobility behavior from Turku inhabitants and not the mobility behavior in pandemic era. The survey was attracting about 800 respondents, and in the core of it was the search for urban mobility lifestyles. The results of the survey revealed 4 different personas or lifestyles among Turku residents. The first one was pro-sustainable urbanites, where we are talking about People who value green, beautiful neighborhoods prefer walking and cycling and good accessibility to public transportation. These people are often females and rather young and live in intensive transit zones. They were about 23% of those kind of inhabitants. The next group was multimodal price-conscious residents who were quite cost sensitive in their travel mode choice, but they used different travel modes in a very flexible way, value functionality over attractiveness, and are typically males and highly educated with a somewhat limited budget. The first two groups are where people who walk more than the following two groups, even in winter time, and actually also cycle more. So the last two groups are first time-conscious suburbanites who value suburban, quiet, green neighborhoods. And they are very time-sensitive and car-oriented. Very often these are high-income residents who have children, own at least one car, and are likely to live in intensive transit zones. And these people use more cars than other groups, regardless where they live. And finally, the last group, auto-oriented residents who prefer good access to the main roads and actually also district shopping centers, value cleanness and spacious housing in their neighborhoods, and often are rather old, live alone or with a partner. These residents have quite car-dependent lifestyle, but they are decreasing their use of car if they live in intensive transit zone. Maybe you can think about a second whether you belong to any of these groups or whether you are some kind of mixture of characteristics of different personas. We were interested in learning whether the well-being or quality of life would differ in these different groups, and we found that perceived health was highest among pro-sustainable urbanites, maybe not surprisingly, and lowest among auto-oriented. But when we studied perceived quality of life, then we got a little bit different results because time-conscious suburbanites had highest quality of life and pro-sustainable urbanites lowest. So this is something we would have to study more in the future. This difference between perceived health and perceived quality of life outcomes was somewhat interesting. How about then the future mobility to Turku Harbor? Well, we found out that the likelihood for using walking and cycling infrastructure, bike sharing and other sharing services and electric bike or improved transit services is highest among pro-sustainable urbanites. And when it comes to ride sharing, car sharing and car rental services to the harbor and harbor related trips, then the time sensitive suburbanites were the ones whose likelihood would be highest for using these kind of new services. There has been also, in addition to this study that I have already discussed, there was a master thesis about the same data set where the aim was to still go a bit deeper into the wonderful data that we collected from Turku. And here the residential self-selection was studied and was taken into account in the study that aimed to examine to what extent are built environment and attitudes associated with car use, walking and cycling. There were many interesting results here, maybe among them one very interesting one, it was that living in intensive transit zone is likely to increase walking and decrease car use regardless of travel attitudes and preferences. And this finding in our understanding gives support to this kind of nudging phenomenon. So how can these results be used in planning or in transportation and land use planning? Well, at least these 4 identified persons can be targeted as different market segments for different mobility management strategies or policies. And surely the results can be also considered when investing to the improvements of certain travel modes or when decided about the maintenance levels of various routes. And finally, the findings can also inform more generally land use policy when estimating the best balance between supply and demand of various types of urban neighborhoods. Maybe there are other ways to apply these findings you might want to identify. If you are interested, the report about this study is available online. Please take a closer look. And if you have any further questions, please contact me. I will also be available at least for the next hour for possible questions. So thank you very much. This was the little case study in city of Turku.
Thank you very much, Marketta. Very interesting and also, I think, very relatable presentation for any urban residents. We are already having some questions and we're already sharing more information about Naptioneer in the chat, but we will come back to this in the end of the session, in the Q&A part. And now let's move to the south, to the free and Hanseatic city of Hamburg. Heike Bunte will present us a city district where interactive tools were applied to promote transport and active mobility in port areas. Please, Heike, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for the introduction. Okay, Marketta already mentioned it. It is about mobility. It is about different kind of mobility, and it's about what also Tero mentioned, active mobility or sustainable mobility options. It is said to be that port areas are not made for this kind of mobility activities, especially if it comes to walking and cycling. But as you all know, cities grow as well as harbor regions grow, and we focus or we face some problems with that. So we thought it is absolutely essential to work on the aspect, how can we attract also port areas to cyclists, public transport users and pedestrians. Actually, I'm also referring here to the Turku case because they have a brilliant report on the development of their area. So you can find this also on our HUPMOBILE homepage, and it's worthwhile reading it. So if it comes to Hamburg, we deeply need, to develop these areas. Hamburg already did the so-called jump over the River Elbe in order to attract new residential areas, being aware at the same time that we will face conflicts with port-related transport. Nevertheless, it is needed to, or there was a strong need to develop these areas because the city is growing, more and more people moving into cities. So we decided to develop these specific areas under specific topics: new metropolitan zones, climate change, cosmopolis as a new lifestyle question, as Marketta also pointed out, with showing residential behavior towards active mobility. But nevertheless, in these processes, there's always a lack of certain aspect. And one central issue was really climate-friendly modes of transport in port areas. As you can see from this picture and from our, so to say, monument or main monument in the harbor, the old tunnel under the River Elbe, during the 20s, it was completely normal that people used the bicycle to get to work. These masses of cyclists needed to get through the Elbe tunnel every day and back, of course. But there are typical, so to say, port arguments against active mobility. This relates to diversity of transport modes, and of course, this relates to safety aspects. No doubt, the diversity is much higher. The diversity of several transport forms, of several specific problems over the daytime is much higher than in the normal city. We have transport, we have logistic in these areas. Nevertheless, it is absolutely necessary to play and to act actively on safety. This is why we focused to deliver or to invent an animation tool for active mobility in order to increase safety for cyclists and pedestrians. We also added several aspects of safety in these areas. Here you can see a cycling path, and on the right-hand side of the picture, you see that we protected here cyclists and pedestrians with a specific infrastructure that lorry drivers respect the space and respect that we have cyclists in the harbor. Actually, again, as you also know, intersections are always a crucial point in city and land use planning. Of course, no doubt, also in harbors, it is essential. So if you plan your intersections, pay additional attention to intersections, try to make them as safe as possible for cycling, and try to increase awareness for this aspect. And if you have done this, intersections are, so to say, in a certain way, much safer. And please go into detail with that and into communication with your stakeholders. So what we can learn from this is really create and raise awareness under all stakeholders, especially if it comes to specific intersections, specific roads, where you have already a certain number of cyclists, or if you have already ideas how and what you want to implement in your harbor areas, in your port areas. So I already mentioned it. Take into account that you need to build up on communication from the beginning. This is very time consuming, but in the end it is worthwhile. Find legal tools and good networks to influence your port authority on all levels. Talk about additional services as winter service for cycling in these areas. Use the development of additional bus routes. Look for crucial bottlenecks and intersections and talk about safety. And last but not least, and that is essential, point out that active mobility contributes also to an economic access of your port area. Less individual motorized transport means less congestion and better transport economy. So it is mega essential that you work on this kind of transport. And last but not least, develop smart and safe solution. Grab the so-called low-hanging fruits and combine it with something you already have in your port area. Last but not least, it's a long and muddy way, especially if you have to integrate many stakeholders at the same time. Nevertheless, it will contribute, or active mobility will contribute to the success of your port area. Be aware that we are currently discussing within the European Union our TEN-T options and the TEN-T corridors. And here we need a good contribution also if it comes to active mobility. Thank you so much. And now we also have a tiny little video. Maybe Adam, we can browse through it somehow if it's possible. We invented this video in order to show to daily commuters, don't be afraid to use port areas. Thank you so much.
Hello everybody, my name is Heike Bunte. I'm today here for the European Interreg project HUPMOBILE. Today we invite you for a unique journey for everyday cyclists, commuters, because it's important that we increase cycling in cities, as you know. Actually, it is also important that cyclists are able to cycle more than the average 5 kilometers. It's also important that we show how good it is to develop side routes for cyclists or velo routes and their contribution to increase cycling in our cities today. Apart from that, we all know that cities grow, and they also grow in terms of unique, specific urban areas. Here we are in Hamburg, Wilhelmsburg. A couple of years ago, it was quite famous, this area, because it is in between the northern part of the city and the southern part of the city. Today we are here on the biggest river island in Europe. In between this space, this island and the northern part, there is the harbor. And if you believe that cycling in harbors is not possible, then you're wrong. And it's also important to show how we develop these areas, because it is necessary that cycling is possible everywhere, safe and in a good condition. So let's go for it. See you.
Okay, thank you so much for this short introduction into our video. It is a little bit longer because, as I said, we wanted to show cycling is more than just covering the 5 kilometers. You can see the whole one on our homepage, on the HUPMOBILE homepage. And as I also said or mentioned in the video, what we really want to develop is a whole net of cycling routes. And what we also want to show with this video is that commuters who are interested in cycling longer distances can click on it and get additional information what they can expect. And now, last thing, I'm trying to show you something else. Can you see this on the screen now? HUPMOBILE cycling in harbor cities. So this is also what you just have seen in the video. This is the whole distance. It covers 15 kilometers, important commuter kilometers. So if you imagine you want to give it a go, you can also click on these little points here. Self-fulfilling process. Sorry, it does not work. Anyway, if you click.
Heike, it should be lower down. Try to scroll a bit lower.
Okay. Yes, sorry. So, for example, if you click then here on these specific dots and points, you get information what you can see and what you can expect there. And we did this for the whole 15 kilometers. We mentioned crucial points. We mentioned specific aspects at these points. So altogether, it shall help you to get additional information about the routing, about the whole distance, about the whole story which stands behind it, right? And last but not least, here is also the overall story in the end. So these are our tools in a nutshell to hopefully make it more interesting and hopefully to show that cycling in port areas is possible, also walking and cycling. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this presentation, Heike, for taking us on this 15 kilometers exciting trip. Very holistic view on the process and great practical examples. We are sharing all of these materials also in the chat in parallel, and you will receive all of these materials after the webinar. So no worries, you will get to explore them further. And now let's move to Tallinn, the city which explored possibilities of adaptive traffic management through mini pilots. Liivar Luts will present the case from the city of Tallinn. Welcome, Liivar, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. So good morning or late morning to everyone. I tried to set up this presentation. So can you please confirm that everything is okay? Can you see my slides?
Yes, we see it now.
Great, so thank you. So yeah, my name is Liivar Luts and coming from city of Tallinn, Estonia, and working for the Tallinn Transport Department. And today I'm quickly run through the topic, which is quite interesting, namely the adaptive traffic management and what we did within the HUPMOBILE project and what results we had. So going further, what was the objective? For the city of Tallinn in the HUPMOBILE project, the idea was to increase the mobility flows using the electronic solutions and promoting the switch towards public and greener transport. So basically, in the short, promoting public transport, trying to find ways how to make it quicker and more feasible for the users. So what we did, we worked out the pre-feasibility study on the adaptive traffic management, and we aggregated also the simulation. So what this means is that we investigate various adaptive traffic light solutions in the market. There are not so many, and it's quite difficult to gather the information as not very many cities are experienced with this. Also, we made the audit for the existing adaptive traffic system. So basically, we already, before that study, we already had some fragments of the adaptive traffic light system. So we want to just make audit to understand whether it's well put together and well in operation, or there are some shortcomings. And lastly, the objective is to set up the specific hotspot mini pilot area to validate the technologies in real traffic conditions. So not just desk research, but just going further and to understand whether it's working in actual conditions and in which circumstances, and how it looks in real situation. So, and going further, the evaluation of the Tallinn use case. So what we did, basically, we started with market research. We just looked at what's happened in nearby cities and what's available. Based on this information, we just started to prepare the terms of reference of the procurement process, and we also discussed about this topic with interested stakeholders and asked their opinion about what's possible to make and how they can help with us. And then we decided also to integrate or merge the pre-feasibility study with the mini pilot. So this is like the package. So there is desk research and also the mini pilot. And what kind of challenge we faced? There was a problem that during the COVID situation, there was like a radical traffic behavior change. So not very many cars and trucks, and also the pedestrians are in the city. So it means that we have a problem that all these volumes which we had before, they are not there anymore, but okay, it can change, that's for sure. So we had to face this as well as a one problem. Yes, about the details of the pre-feasibility study. So what we did is that we made a benchmark study. So it means that we just looked different market solutions. And also we looked 4 different cities who have some experience of the adaptive traffic management. Those cities were Tampere, Copenhagen, Skopje, and Sofia was the Białystok was the 4th one. So it was quite interesting to see what these cities are doing, how far they are with this, and to see whether we can use these experience in our case as well. So going further, we wanted to analyze the investment and running costs, also the socio-economic cost when we implement the adaptive traffic management system in the city of Tallinn in a wider scale. So how much does it cost? What kind of running costs there will be, and is it worth to have it? Is it feasible or not? Also, what we will dig in the integration of the new technologies and transport modes. So, for example, the car sharing, self-driving cars, etc. So this was also quite interesting for us to understand how the adaptive traffic management will influence those technologies. Then, as I said already, we had some fragments already before this study. We had adaptive traffic management in Reidi Road, which is a new road nearby the port, and we want to understand whether it's set up well what kind of shortcomings there are. Later on, I will show the map as well. So also we wanted to understand which kind of data is needed and which kind of data we have and is useful, and as well as what the kind of additional data we need. Then we wanted to map the potential corridors, or we did it to understand in which corridors it's the most feasible way to implement adaptive traffic management, rather than just having the whole city, but to start somewhere, just to map the corridors and to start implementing them there. And also we want to have a help in order to understand how we should set up the technical specification for the procurement and to set writing the terms of reference. This was also very important to understand. And going further, so basically, first the radio road audit. So it means that we had a new road, which is the nearby port, and which is serving basically the inbound and outbound traffic of the port. And we already have there some fragments of smart self-learning traffic lights, which also take into account about passenger cars and the traffic volume coming from the ferry. So it means that it's very essential that we understand how many cars are coming from the ferry, and maybe to give a more green light for the outbound traffic. We have there also, as well as dynamic traffic management system, which is the backbone, and also the VMSs, so the variable message signs. And the results of the audit was that this setup is good, but there are some issues. The first issue is that the sensor system is not good. So it means that they're not so precise, and this can cause some issues playing with the lights, traffic lights. And secondly, the variable message signs were quite bad in that sense that when there is some kind of bad angle, or there is some light, like the sunlight, then it's quite hard to see the picture of the screen. So this was quite interesting for us, and now we understand the future, what kind of systems we should procure, or what we should avoid. Going further about the mini pilot. So what we did is that we set up the mini pilot area, which is in the right. You can see the Tallinn map. Here is the harbor, and it's quite near to the harbor. And it was quite tricky intersection. Why? Because it's the H shape. And also in the red line, you can see there is the passing tram line. So it means that it's quite tricky to play this intersection. And we just took one of the toughest one just to understand whether the adaptive traffic systems can improve the traffic flow here or not. And we just take the main consideration, increasing the average speed of the tram, or just decreasing the waiting time. And we just use the sensor system, which you can see on the screen. So what kind of tools we use? So different detectors, like the video detectors, thermal detectors, and the buttons. And we added to the mini pilot also the smart intersection software, which basically is the backbone and the brain, which decide when to give the green light. And what kind of task we set? So the idea was just to have a prioritization for the public transport and not wasting too much of the green time. And just to understand the results of the mini pilot, the total waiting time for cars was smaller. So it means that basically we didn't influence so much of the car traffic, but we gain a lot of time saving for the trams passing the intersection. So there are two different stops, the Malev Sitsi one way and another way, and it's like a 24 seconds and 12 seconds. So could you imagine that, okay, this is just a couple of tens of seconds, but if you compare it to like the days and months, how much time difference it is. So it plays quite a remarkable role. The only issue is that the pedestrian must push the button. So it means that before we had just the automatic system, so the pedestrians didn't have to do anything, just to wait the green light and that's it. But now they should push the button, and this was the negative impact because they are used to it that they don't have to do nothing, but then they have to wait quite a while. Then they understand that they have to push something. So this was the negative impact of the mini boiler. And now I can just show quickly the video of the tram is coming. So tram is coming quite far, and all the time when the tram is coming, automatically puts the green light for the tram, and all the traffic, all other traffic will stop. There are some issues as well with this, is that the cars will not stick to the traffic light, and they will pass the intersection red light as well. So it means that tram driver aware of that there can be some issues rather than the tram driver has a green light, but you have to just be aware that some cars have. So this is one video, and I will now the next one. The other side of the road is the next. Here is we had a problem that the stop is quite near the intersection. So what we did is that as the tram approaches to the stop, then the detector detects that the tram is here, and we just calculated 18 seconds from the stop that people can leave the street and then go in, and 18 seconds to approach to the intersection. So it was tricky, but all in all, quite good results. So yes. So as a nutshell, so the benchmark cities have long-term experience, very good to follow, and we will continue to cooperate with them. So as a result, there is no end product for all cities. So it's always so that we need to start to tailoring and tailor-made system for each case, each intersection or each corridor. The sensor information is super crucial. So it means that, for example, the Reidi road, there was issue that the sensors were not so good, and it means that it's giving a false signal. We used the thermal camera sensors, but they are also not so accurate. The most accurate system is the sensor system in the surface, but the problem is that it's quite expensive to build this, and you have to maintain these as well. So it's just quite tricky, but still the sensor information is quite crucial. We see that the adaptive traffic system is very feasible only in heavy traffic corridors. It's not worth to spend too much effort and time and investments to have it just low flow corridors. And we understand that there are no major increase of maintenance costs based on the observation of the mini pilot. What kind of challenge we have? So basically, the issue is that what kind of priorities to set and how to set these priorities to different user groups. So basically, okay, we want to prioritize the public transport, but what about the pedestrians? Maybe pedestrians are in some part more important as public transport. So it's just a chicken and egg question. Also, the impact of road traffic safety. As I mentioned, we had the shortcoming that the pedestrians, they just wait quite long, and they just need to push the button in order to understand that they can get the green light and pass the intersection. So the vagueness is issue that people are not very much like to wait too long, and they just want to cross the road without the green light. So this is just also the impact, and also the impact of new technologies is the challenge. So it means that how these self-driving cars and the different new technologies will integrate and will work together with adaptive traffic management. And maybe in not far future, maybe we should change all the traffic light system in order to work these new technologies better together with the city provided system. What we will continue after this study and the mini pilot. So we will improve the tram connection between city center and the airport. So it's relatively slow, quite heavy, quite a lot of intersections between the corridor, and we try to increase the speed of the tram, so giving a more green light and to see how it will affect the surrounding traffic flows. And that's it basically. So thank you very much, and looking forward to your questions and comments.
Thank you very much, Liivar. It was really fascinating to look into the city planning process and how can you address traffic challenges and save the time. And great to see that now Tallinn citizens are also actively involved in the process, if only by pushing the button. Thank you. And we continue with the citizen engagement process. And the last presentation for today would be delivered by the city of Riga. And with all smart infrastructure plans deployed, how do you engage your stakeholders into this co-creative process? This would be answered by the team from the city. We had small changes in the program. It would be Victoria Prilenska and Kristaps Kaugurs bringing us up to speed on this question. So please, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. It is my pleasure to talk to you at this fine morning. I will be, as already stated, I will be doing my presentation with my colleague Victoria Prilenska. And I hope that the presentation is starting up right about now at your screens. And you see my first slide. So if nobody objects, then this is probably working perfectly well. I will start the presentation, and it will be threefold. I will start with the origin story of how did we arrive to this task and how did it change during the process. We also want to show you and share with you our end product that was originally unexpected or unintended. And however, we are really proud of that. And we hope that it will help all of you in your daily work, working with stakeholder involvement and trying to manage or navigate those different methods and approaches. And then I will ask my colleague Victoria to guide you a little bit deeper into that process or the framework that lies behind our work, which might give you a slightly better understanding of the importance of each of those steps. So I will skip, or I will be brief and get over some parts in the presentation just to give you closer to the interesting part. So as already stated, we are the guys who always talk about the stakeholder involvement process. We are the group who should be the ones to begin with early stages of the process and not in the end of the presentation, although today is not representative of that. And these were some of our original tasks to tackle in this project. It's something that we all know. It's some stages of the public involvement, initiation, planning, implementation. We all know that early in the process, all the problem statements are done and key decisions are usually made early in the process in the planning and design phase. And a typical point of participation is somewhere where people are presented with something that's already ready, done, and not many changes can be done in that process. And we all, our aim and our goal is to provoke people and invite people to use the holistic approach, the stakeholder engagement and co-creation, and expand it to all of the processes, starting from the early initiation and following on through the evaluation and research phase right at the end and after the project is already implemented. So we got on with our tasks. This is something that we were set out by the HUPMOBILE project, and we started with everything that's usually done in these kinds of projects. And then, of course, the COVID came into the play. Initially, we waited, it was a while until world started to understand that this is something that's not going to change that quickly. And we saw that participatory urban planning is largely face-to-face process, and the world was trying to adapt. People were trying to use Zoom for the meetings and all the other internet tools, and they were trying to cope as they could, as to say. So it was often that organizations and municipalities were skipping on something that they decided that's non-essential. So we thought that we need to redefine our goals and to see whether we can do better. And then we came up with this next part of the story, or something that I want to share with you today. We thought that we need to create some kind of a tool, probably some online tool that helps you to see through both physical face-to-face methods, but also something new that's coming into our lives, some digital methods, how you can use or transform some of those old and well-known physical tools to digital age and digital application. And we probably want to have something that helps you search through all of those methods that you could apply, and something that helps you navigate all of this jungle of different approaches. So we set out to create something initially for the HUPMOBILE project to help our partners, but we hope that it could help everybody else in everyday life. So as you probably saw in beforehand, we thought that those 5 steps should come into the play. Those could be a basic checklist by defining your goals, knowing your stakeholders, but we thought that one crucial part is choosing the method and choosing the right method for the task. So we set out by creating this online tool, which looks pretty similar as the previous illustration. I hope that you will research that later on after this presentation, and it helps you out. But what we did here, we created this well-described 5-step framework that my colleague Victoria is going to talk about a little bit more on later on, just to give you an understanding on how the stages work in this process. We also created this national participation baseline research for the countries that were involved in this project, and described all of that process as stated beforehand. But the most part and the most attention we put into this method toolkit, or something that you can sort through. So we created this library of known methods that you can go through. Unfortunately, there is one part missing in this presentation, I think. Okay, it's here. So we created this library of tools. We have about 16 digital and 16 face-to-face methods, and they are all described in the detail how you can apply them, and how and where are the best examples that you can get inspired by. We also created this selection tool, or the something that you can sort all those methods by. Something more obvious, like basic filters as a group size that you want to tackle, or geographical scope, but also in a larger and more difficult or more nuanced sorting methods as a planning phase, or this fourfold classification for the communicative actions, or level of stakeholder engagement, for example. So you can use all of these parameters to sort through the method and hopefully find something that suits you best, or your project best. And We hope that this tool that we are quite proud of is something that will keep on living long after the project. We still keep on improving it from a month-to-month basis, but we also hope that this is something that helps you follow through the holistic approach of stakeholder engagement, and we hope that it will aid you in choosing the right tools and it make your life a little bit simpler. And we all know that adequate tools and allow for more flexible stakeholder engagement and eventually for the better results. So this is a point where I would like to ask my colleague Victoria to come in and guide us through all of those 5 stages that we decided to have as a base framework for our online tool, and we hope that you can see the presentation following up. Okay, it works. Victoria, do we hear you? Victoria, we can't hear you. Okay, perfect.
Now can you hear me?
Yes, excellent.
We are exploring Zoom opportunities for the remote control, and now it seems that it works really well. So, as you know, civic engagement is quite a widely accepted practice in contemporary spatial planning, and the legal minimum is usually limited to the public hearings, and some other additional activities are basically depend on the willingness and resources of the local government. If there is some additional funding or resources, then they happen. If not, then very often there is nothing else. And usually, in my view, in this public hearing model, participation happens intermittently. Firstly, it happens upon the initiation of the plan. And secondly, after planning and design is completed shortly before implementation of the plan. And in this model, the role of citizens usually is limited to the critics of the ready-made plans. So in our project, we propose a more continuous model of civic engagement where residents are involved early on and continue participating throughout the whole planning cycle. And thus residents take a more proactive role and transform through the critics to sort of the co-creators of the plans. And for this holistic kind of continuous participation, there is a need for quite elaborate and diverse stakeholder engagement approach. And our tool offers 5 simple steps of building your stakeholder engagement strategy, in the end of which, and applying those tools, you end up with drawing a public participation plan. So the first step in this model would be know your stakeholders. And in this phase, you identify relevant stakeholder groups, current and future. You also think of stakeholder needs, wishes, roles, and capacities. And for example, Marketta already told that there are different personas with different views on life and with different needs. So you might also think about something else. You should also think about possible outreach channels. Is it for the website or personal contacts, or how are you going to contact them? And you should contact the stakeholders and actually negotiate their participation in the process. And what is also important and quite often overlooked is that you should inform the stakeholders about potential drawbacks and benefits of participation. So in step number 2, you define the goals of participation, and we think that it's important to discuss these participation goals together with the stakeholders, how they see the process, what do they expect, and also what you would like to achieve. And some quite frequent objectives here, I just list a few objectives of participation, but there can be many. Some of these participation aims or goals could include informing the stakeholders or collecting their contribution or some experimental information, or collect some sort of other relevant information that you need, for example, from public utility providers. Also, participation could be related with the resolution of spatial conflicts, but also it's a very important goal of participation is just the development of social capital, because it might happen because the community is not interested in participation at all, or doesn't have enough knowledge about planning issues, or maybe doesn't even know that they could participate. So, and this informing participants and about their options and maybe co-working together with them. So it's all is included under this goal development of social capital. So in step number three, actually it's where our tool comes to place. You pick a method or a selection of methods from a toolkit. So, and this selection of tools is dependent upon 9 categories, and it's the number of participants, the geographic scale or thematic scope of the planning phase where this participation happened. Also, how engaged are the stakeholders in the process? So actually the level of their engagement, the mode of communication, do you want them to participate online or face-to-face? Also some skills and resources that are required. For example, is it, do you require some expert knowledge or basic skills are enough? And how much resources do you need? But also these different types of knowledge that is produced in this participation process. So as you see, there are quite various things. And we think that it's not one method that you usually should select for these public participation plans, but at least a few of them to get a more holistic understanding of user needs and requirements. So in the fifth step, usually you collect and analyze data. Note that not every participation process is related to data collection and analysis. So as I outlined before, the goals of participation may vary, and you might also just want to build social capital within the community to make the community an active and proactive actor of urban change. But in case you still collect any information, keep in mind that there are different types of data that you may collect and different tools that you may need for data analysis. And this data question is crucial because you have to keep in mind the way how are you going to analyze these contributions. For example, there are examples where there were questionnaires about what people would like to see in the community, and these answers were unstructured, and once you have a big amount of this data, you cannot analyze it anymore. So you have to think about these things while drawing your public participation plan. And also, speaking of participation, this data can be of two kind of types. It can be either cross-sectional. It could take a whole sample, different stakeholder groups across the whole city, or it might be longitudinal. For example, you study one and the same group of people or one and the same neighborhood after certain changes. So that's why these things, that's why it's also important to archive this data and then compare these types of data. So, and the last step, but not least, would be evaluation of the results. And this is the stage where you reflect on the participation process and the outcomes. And we would like you to ask yourself questions. Did you manage to achieve the goals outlined initially in your public participation plan? Did you manage to engage diverse stakeholder groups? Were the stakeholders satisfied with the process or with the outcomes of participation? And based on this information, you should brainstorm in the next participation process how to modify it. Maybe you should modify your outreach channels, or maybe you should pick different tools next. Something that you might do in a different way. So, and further, oops, yeah, further, some slides are missing. Oh no, they are, I think, here. So, to assist you in designing all these processes, as Kristaps mentioned, we have developed an online participatory toolkit, which consists of 32 participation methods from digital and analog realms, and you can filter and search the methods. And an essential, but often overlooked characteristic out of these 9 is what kind of knowledge does your participation process produce. Spatial planning can be conceptualized as a series of diverging and converging knowledge production cycles. In diverging phase, you open up to multiple voices and perspectives to create new knowledge and ideas. And in converging phase, you close down to assess the value of this generated knowledge and ideas and perhaps develop an action plan. That's why participation methods can be positioned in 4 quadrants depending on this convergence and divergence of knowledge, and also the mode of work. Do you work with big groups or do you work with small groups? And this distinction between working in big and small groups is made to emphasize the difference in communication opportunities between the stakeholders. Big groups usually foster participation, while small groups are better suitable for collaboration. So while drawing a public participation plan, it's essential to pick the methods which would fit all 4 categories. For example, you can see here, I have developed an example which shows both face-to-face and online methods, so that you could pick from participatory toolkit to fill on 4 quadrants, and thus develop this holistic and multifaceted participation strategy. As you know, in our workshop, we had also some workshops with partner cities, and we have also tried to analyze if current participation strategies or the tool that they are using produce different types and diverse knowledge. And here are some experiences from different cities. So as you see, some cities, or yes, some of them really do use or try to fill all 4 quadrants, whereas some other partners, there is still some place for improvement and try to diversify your methodological toolkit. So thank you very much for your attention on behalf of our team. We are open for questions, if any.
Thank you very much, Kristaps and Victoria. Great presentation. Thank you very much for presenting this extensive library of approaches that everyone can use and apply, and the whole methodology on how it was developed. And yeah, I'm just checking the chat. Everybody is also joining in, saying thank you. We are unfortunately a little bit behind the schedule. And still we had a very, very nice and active audience today, and we've got many questions. Luckily, most of our speakers were already answering their the existing questions in the chat as we went. So I think that perhaps we would only address a couple of questions that are still open or that were answered in a that mode. So first of all, I would invite Heike to the stage. And there was a bit of an extensive exchange in the Q&A about the different approaches to safety inspections and differences in planning the airport area and seaport area. Could you, Heike, perhaps shortly comment to everyone who wasn't following this discussion, what was it about, what was the question about, and what was your answer? So I think we identified a bit of a gap in addressing safety inspections, so perhaps it's something for maybe new projects or...
Yes, definitely. And I think it was Uma, sorry for pronouncing it wrong. Thank you for this interesting question, by the way. And it was about if port areas or cities have the same high-level inspection rules, so to say, as if it comes to aviations and airports. Actually, there is a difference. And what we also found out in HUPMOBILE is that the influence of cities on port authorities who are responsible for these areas is limited in a way. So definitely this is a follow-up project, and also it is a follow-up question how to increase safety aspects in these areas. So thanks for this question, and I think we really have to work on that. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Heike. We also have a question from Kasra. Let's see if we can connect you directly. You have raised your hand. Please, you should be able to ask your question now.
Yes, I'm Kasra Ketabullahi. Thank you so much for your webinar. I live in Iran, in Middle East. As you know, it has the same geography. It's surrounded by the Khazar Sea in the north and the Persian Gulf in south. But unfortunately, most of the lands of the seaports and the coasts and beaches are constructed by constructors. It's used for private villas and something like that, and there are no lands to planning. How you interpret the role of stakeholders, urban designers, urban planners, landscape architecture without the support of government and something like that? How they can, for example, can change the role? Because Iran has the same geography like Baltic countries. If you answer me. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Is any of our speakers ready to take this question? It was addressed to different types of stakeholders. It might be a bit difficult at the moment, and unfortunately, because of this time, we also, some of our speakers had to leave. Yeah, nobody is unfortunately unmuting. Well, unfortunately, maybe we can't address this question right now. We'll think if we can find the answer and maybe include it into the materials. I would still try to proceed with the questions that we have in the chat. There was just arrived a question. Have you considered a gender-based approach in your project? Maybe Tero could answer this as the lead partner of the project. How was the gender equality addressed through these urban planning processes?
Yes, that's a very good question, because sometimes we had it was quite fun, because you would think that in most projects it would be very male oriented, but actually both the professors and actually we had here from the universities were female, Professor Marketta Kyttä and from KTH, Janike Balsut-Hauge. And then we have from Hamburg, we have had Heike, and also from UBC, we have had female participants, and also Inga and other from Riga. So, and from Turku, Jenna Kaarela. So yes, actually, we've been a little bit worried about that. Do we have enough males here in our panel? But of course, it's very good that we have this, that we have had people of different genders and ages available, and also with different backgrounds. So yes.
Maybe a question also. Is this question meant to be of the HUPMOBILE project consortium, or how we acted within our cities? Because, for example, what we also did is to talk about mobility poverty under women here in Hamburg, especially in specific areas of the city. Yeah, and of course, I think it's a good question if it comes to, so to say, unusual areas in the city. You deeply need to address gender aspects. I don't know if it answers, but yes, we care for it.
That's wonderful to hear. Thank you
and
very
also
much.
other what I have heard from the cities, that there are some elderly people now that we do the digitalization and the smart mobility and active mobility, that how do we take into account also elderly people?
Thank you. And I would also like to ask the questions that were sent for Liivar's presentation about Tallinn. There were a couple of questions that I think ours might still not be answered. Maybe this is the time to find out the answer. So first of all, could you address the matter of installing sensors? How did these sensors installed improve the traffic?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
So going a bit more general, why the sensors is important is the fact that if you have a dynamic information, what's actually happening with the traffic in certain time, whether it's like actual information coming right now, or this like historical information, it's much better for the city and for the traffic planners to play with the traffic, so to say. So it means that regarding the traffic lights, it's if you don't have adaptive traffic light system, so you have just a static system which not calculates what's actually happening on the streets. Okay, you have like a different setups for the peak hours and for the night times and for the rest of the day. But still, it's not mirroring what's actually happening on the streets. So information from the sensors is crucial. Information for the sensor is crucial for the adaptive traffic management and setting this, and just to understand what's the traffic flow in current time. So I think that this plays more and more role for the cities. And just to mention Estonia and the city of Tallinn, we are, or Estonians are very eager to use Google Waze, not just to understand where to go, but just daily commuting. And so we use the information. So what's the shortest and quickest road from my home to work, and vice versa. And also we just giving the data out how many cars are on the streets. So we are also producing and consuming this information. So this is just a bit beyond of the sensor information, but still it's very important for the city.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for the very elaborate and detailed answer, Liivar. And also addressing this, maybe also like the second questions, also maybe in connection to this. So when the citizens plan how to commute around the city. So the question was, could you measure positive or negative effects in combination with public buses, especially if tram is faster, or do you have separate bus lines in Tallinn? So could you address also this question?
Yes, we have separate bus lines. We have also trolley lines. So they have trams, trolleys, and buses. But basically, we can have more green light for the buses as well, where we can just indicate where is the bus corridors, the bus lines, for example, and basically we have priority system, which is not something adaptive, but still it's a priority when the intersection understands that the public transport fleet is approaching and giving a bit more green light, or letting pass them through the intersection before the other traffic. But all in all, yeah, it can be implemented to all these modes. But for us, the tram is like the backbone, and if the tram is slow, it means that it's like a waste of time and money anyway, because the tram is quite expensive. It's just operating in their own room, but still, if the other traffic and other intersections are slowing the speed rapidly, so this is a big issue. So we want to solve this problem and to find a solution for it.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm afraid we need to finish here with the questions and answers, although there were quite many and are still coming, and answers are still coming. So thank you very much for today's webinar. The full recording of this webinar and presentations and all of the materials and some of the answers that for the questions that have not been answered will be soon available on our website, and we invite you to visit it to find out more about the work we do. Please make sure that you follow our social media or subscribe to our newsletters for staying in the loop. On behalf of the UBC Sustainable Cities Commission, I would like to warmly thank our great speakers today for presenting, for delivering these amazing presentations, bringing most interesting, most important insights into the holistic mobility sector. And to the great engaged audience, thank you very much for joining us today. I hope to see you all again in our future events. Thank you very much for today.